afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of LevelUp Cyber Live. My name is Tony Bryan. I am your host and happen to be Executive Director of CyberUp, but very excited to spend the next 30 or so minutes with everybody. I think talk about a topic that's important for a lot of folks, and I think definitely in times like right now where there's a lot of uncertainty with the economy and a lot of uncertainty in just what the next 6 to 12 months are bringing, and what does that entail for hiring? So I think it's a timely discussion, given off some of the conversations that we're having at CyberUp with employers and how the market and job and hiring market's good. So also want to just kind of throw it out there. Sorry for the break, right? Much like everybody else, summer hit, took some vacations and really took some time off for myself to unplug, rewind, and recharge, just to finish out the year strong and really think of how CyberUp grows this over the next, 3 to 5 years as we're wrapping up our strategic plan. But for today's purposes, we're going to talk about the concept of build versus buy versus borrow talent, right? I think, as a sector, specifically in cybersecurity, there's really been a big mindset of buying folks. So before we even jump into that, I want to make sure that we kind of set the stage around the definitions of those three words, what those three words entail, and then how we're going to use them kind of throughout this conversation over the next 28 or so minutes. But buying, building, borrowing. So setting expectations. Buying is simply just that, right? Hiring somebody who works for your organization from an external talent marketplace. That could be a recruiter, that could be staffing, that could be just simply, taking somebody from another organization, but you're paying that person a salary for your team for their very specific skill set they're going to bring to your organization. And oftentimes that's going to, cost you a premium for that particular set of skills. Next one is building talent. Obviously CyberUp, we're an apprenticeship partner program. So, building is a big part of what we do. And really just an important kind of aspect of, talent development, but for definition purposes is really progressing and developing people who work for your organization already, upskilling them into the roles that you need that you would be buying for, but really building out some strategy around how you organically build your own team. And then borrowing, I think has gained a lot of momentum over the last several years, especially just the pace in which cybersecurity has gone and just new technologies really is building a network of temporary or contract staff, right? Finding an organization, maybe it's you're outsourcing your incident response or you're third partying your SOC as a service, right? You're borrowing that skill and those humans to really drive what your organization is doing. So as always, if you have questions, you're on live and you got in the chat, hit me up, send us questions. Always definitely happy to answer anything, but I wanted to make sure we kind of set the stage and got this all right. But so the right mix, right? I think is always the question here is, am I an organization that buys? Am I an organization that builds? Or am I an organization that borrows? And I would say that recommend that it really is, it comes down that you should be a mix of all three, right? And I think that the mix of which you would do, borrowing and building or borrowing and buying, that's going to, I think, ebb and flow based off of the, success of the organization, how things are going, simply just, how the culture of that organization wants to go, right? We had a conversation not that long ago with an employer partner here in St. Louis, and they had traditionally outsourced a lot of their SOC as a service and SOC stuff to a third party, right? And it was a costly service for them to send people to. And there was a desire, right, over time, and if it was within budget, that they would actually bring that in-house and not pay somebody else to do that. So, just a way to really think that, what is the right mix, but I think it really does come down to internally, what are those discussions you're having in your team? What percentage of this do we want to build? What do we want to borrow? And what do we want to kind of buy on our own? Not a right or wrong answer by any means, but so I want to make sure I want to dive a little bit deeper into each of the concepts, just to make sure that we are covering those in a really good way. And so I want to start with just the concept of just buying talent, right? Like why is that such an important part? The reflection of glass driving me nuts. Why is that such an important part of how you're growing it, and then why it's effective, right? There are really great times in which you would buy a particular set of skills, right? Like Liam Mason. So, when you're buying that, let's say, it's the first of the year, I'm sure it's into 2023, we're heading into the fourth quarter. Everybody's thinking about 2024. What does this year look like? What projects do we need to finish, and what projects do we want to focus on in 2024? So right then, in that planning discussion, really is the time to really think through, okay, great. What do we currently have? What do we think our needs are going to be for this future project? And then, how are we going to go and do that? So let's say we're an organization and we decide we're going to go 100% cloud-based, right? We've been on-prem security and data for the beginning of time, and we've made a conscious decision that we're going to move to cloud. And we don't have anybody in our staff that is a cloud expert, right? That makes a ton of sense for me, and just in my perspective, to go out, find your cloud specialist that you would like to have bring your staff, and hire that person. Pay them what they are, because what you're ultimately going to need is that subject matter expert that helps your team and your organization navigate what that looks like over the next 12 to 18 months for that project you're going to run. So like in that instance, it makes a ton of sense to buy that person. You may pay a premium, you might, but I think it's a really important part to have that consistency and kind of internal resource. Where I think the buying part gets a little tricky would be is now you have these secondary and kind of tertiary roles that are going to fall under this person to support the project they're going to work on. And so if you kind of take that same approach around buying talent versus maybe building it, you really run the risk, especially if you're working through maybe some staffing firms or talent recruitment agencies, of buying a particular set of skills, paying that premium. And generally, a lot of times, and more often than not, those individuals really, they're not loyal to your organization. They know that they have a valued skill set. They know that they can charge a premium for that skill set. And there's a strong possibility that when another opportunity for that person to go do that and make substantial more money with an organization, they're going to leave you, right? So it becomes a hired gun or hired skill set that you're going to bring in that has no affinity or no loyalty to your team, to your organization, and they're just going to go kind of farm out their services to the next highest bidder. So, there really is, between that first scenario of finding that subject matter expert to those support roles, those are two very different examples between the two, but both are real in reality, really logical and scenarios that could happen for you and your team. So, finding that right mix of doing it. What I would, generally suggest is you'd find that subject matter expert, bring that person in, and then build a team around that individual, right? You may need to go out and find a couple particular roles or functions, and you would have to continue to buy for that, right? It would be absurd for me or anybody to think that, man, we're going to bring this one person in, they're going to know all the things, they're going to do it all themselves and not going to need any support. That's insane, and it's truly not the option or possibility. So, but you could look internally, right? Look who you currently have in your staff, who's very familiar with your organization, the ins and outs of your technology stacks and your platforms. That would be a great person to put into a role to support that kind of subject matter expert you brought in. So now you're building that talent, right? So thinking through what skills that person currently has, what skills we think that person may need to really be successful within that role. Then how do we give that person the support they need, the coaching they need, and those skills to really be a successful member within that team and that organization? So that's a really solid example of building talent. And I think I like this idea of going good example, bad example. So, an idea of just kind of building talent is on the not so positive side is, it's just, and I've said this a couple times before, over the last several versions of this or kind of episode has been, as a country, apprenticeship, man, it is everywhere you turn. I mean, and maybe it's just the algorithm I'm sitting in because it's just, a lot of the world that I'm in, but hiring and jobs it's all over the place. So you know, bringing in somebody really doing it in mass without any type of strategy, right? Or building out internal infrastructure that is going to be needed to really support a cohort or a group of new folks that have gone through a program to build, right? Like you have to ensure that the culture of your organization is ready. You need to make sure that the hiring managers within your team are equipped with the skills they would need to manage, the desire that they would need to manage a person, and to make sure that they have the capacity to do that, right? Those are really kind of three core components, and we've seen it, right? There's some of the placements we've had at CyberUp. We've had cultures and organizations that have, maybe prematurely brought an apprentice in without any support for that individual and the hiring manager to really kind of help navigate them through how to manage an entry-level person. So, needless to say, that engagement didn't go terrible, but it could have definitely gone better with a little bit more forward thinking and planning, right? So, doesn't mean don't do it. I'm just saying in terms of prior to making a commitment in apprenticeship or non-traditional pathways and really thinking through like, man, we want to have a build first strategy for our organization. Really take a step back, look internally, do assessments of your staff, do assessments of your job functions, and really think through skill sets needed for the hiring managers. Are they ready? Can they do it? Two, are these jobs that we can actually build and train people for? And is the culture organizationally ready? And I think most people, and I've heard it time and time again that these are IT people or technology people, and they're not good people folks, right? Like they have a hard time sometimes with the soft skills. What better way to help somebody grow in their leadership and kind of management function than to manage apprentices or entry-level talent or even interns, right? Interns are a great way to just get a soft exposure to coaching and mentoring folks through a role. So all very important things, but I think essential for an organization that really wants to commit to the idea of building talent. In fact, people might not want managers might not want that responsibility. So, it is important to take a step back. But kind of last thing, kind of tying a bow on it, right? Like progressing your existing staff, right? It does a couple things. One, it creates a culture of your organization that through hard work, through training and commitment, that I too as an individual can move up within this organization. I've set a culture of inclusivity. I've set a culture of retention and employee engagement and morale. So there's a lot of positives that come out of these things to see these programs. And then ultimately, the folks that you're building within your organization, they're loyal to you, right? You gave them a ton of opportunities to be successful that many other organizations wouldn't. And that's going to carry so much weight for them over a period of time. When job offers come, and they will, we all know they will, they're going to think twice and really think through if they want to leave the organization they're with. And a lot of times they're not, right? Because there's a positive feeling there. But long story short, when others within that organization see you as a company making investment in people, increasing the retention, reducing attrition, that really does motivate and inspires other folks within your organization. So it truly is a win-win scenario for the building. Now, and hopefully, take heed, and I'll always make it available. If you have questions, you want to talk through any of these things, please reach out to us or anybody in the CyberUp team. We've had a lot of great conversations with employers to help them think intentionally about this stuff, and I think we have a really good approach and philosophy in a model that I think really makes it easy for everybody to enjoy. But last but not least, kind of putting a bow is really that idea of borrowing, right? If we use that same scenario of like kind of a project-based, like race to the cloud, are there functions in that do we want to outsource, right? Do we want to bring in a consultant, an Accenture, Deloitte, or PwC, or whoever? Do we want to hire a third-party organization to come into our team and to do this for us, right? Like it's a project-based thing, and we can spin it up pretty quick with their help. But then we can focus on the management of it afterwards with some coaching, right? Like, I know I've given this example to multiple kind of managed services departments around this idea of crawl, walk, run, right? Like you crawl first, it's military, kind of a military kind of concept, right? You crawl first. If let's say we're going to dress rehearse assaulting a village or city, we're going to walk through how we're going to do that, right? We're going to have a model, we're going to simulate it, we're going to walk through it and really get familiar with just the space to make sure that there's no questions and we're not missing any kind of things that would, maybe be a blip or something that's going to cause us, a mission failure. So we walk through it, and then we feel comfortable with that crawl phase. We're going to get a little faster, right? Let's walk a little bit more and keep going to improve our skills, and eventually we're going to be ready to go, right? We've done it a couple times. We feel great. Let's do that run phase at least once before we run through it, and then go kind of drop the mission. So that same scenario can really be run through this idea of sorry, I was reading the question. I'll give me a second. I will answer that for you. But it really does help kind of think through what are those things, right? If we do the crawl, like what can we borrow and outsource to bring in some of the stuff, and then where do we want to be the runners, right? So building that out, thinking through the projects, thinking through the skill sets. Is it going to be, if you're looking at doing a cloud-based project, right? If you have nobody in your team that does cloud, we go back to that same build buy scenario and do this transition to borrow. Is it going to cost us more to build and buy the cloud staff and support we need, or is it just going to simply be easier to bring a third party in to do it for us? So, and I think it really depends. A good example for us that I think really resonates, and I think for a lot of organizations like CyberUp, we're part of a PEO, right? A professional employment organization. So what that means for us, we're a small team of 8 people. The buying power of 8 people for benefits and insurance and 401k is really not that great, right? So you go into a PEO and they're a much larger organization. They have tens of 20s of 30s of thousands of folks on their payroll. So that shared buying power reduces our cost, right? So for insurance and benefits, so as an organization, we get offer benefits just as good as any other large company because we share the buying power. We're borrowing the buying power of that organization, similar to borrowing the brain power of those folks for some of these projects in a really great way. Now, in that scenario, for the PEO specifically for us, there is a tipping point, right? Like at some point we'll have enough staff, right? With the level of success that CyberUp continues to have, that it'll financially and fiscally likely make sense for us to internalize that PEO service. We'd have more staff, more buying power to go out and do that stuff in house, and we're going to save a little bit of money. I don't think it's going to be much, but we'll definitely save money. But in the grand scheme, right, in that scenario, we would have to go buy an HR person. We'd have to go, get a payroll service to make sure we're staying competitive with those things and really thinking through what that is. Right now, a lot of that is covered through the PEO services, so it allows us to save money now through borrowing versus buying or building, right? For us, as we go down that transition to getting away from PO, we would likely buy an HR person to come into our organization to think through those things, and then we would build a team around that individual to support them. That's just the scenario that we would do. But as I said a little earlier, a well-rounded talent strategy, right? And I hope if there's any foot stomp to take away from this today is that I'm encouraging organizations, I'm encouraging schools to really think strategically about their talent acquisition. I know I've talked about it before around college and apprenticeships and interns and all these different things. And truth be told, all of them are great, right? It's just a matter of thinking through what is the right mix for you, what is it going to take, and I think finding and surrounding yourself, with trusted partners that you can ask questions to and really understand where you sit at any given time is an important and essential functions and roles in the organization. So I really appreciate. I'm gonna botch your name so bad. Matabuchi Nwanko, right? I like the idea of definitely looking internally, right, to fill job positions. There's part of it is you really have to understand what you currently have in your staff, right? I've seen a lot of over the last several years where organizations are investing time and energy of bringing in third party consultants, right? So like do skills assessments and really take a deep dive into what your current team has. What are the skills they do? We did it 2 years ago, really kind of looked at our, what are the 8 functions that our organization does, and do we have enough people covering down each function, or should we need to hire folks to really build that out? So I think doing that same thing for your internal jobs goes a long way, so if you understand what you currently have sitting on in your desks or on your Zoom calls, depending if you're remote or in person, you might have somebody in that. So, simply by, 1, asking if somebody is interested, and 2, finding some sort of assessment to determine, viability of that person's skill set, or understanding where there may be deficiencies within that person's skill set where you could upskill that person to do it. What I would encourage in that scenario, upskilling is really a great and effective way for companies to leverage federal and state dollars. There's a lot of programs that are out there, and a lot of we'll call them job centers or WIOA boards, Workforce Investment Opportunity Act boards, that are in your community. For those that aren't familiar, generally your WIOA board is your unemployment office. They for whatever reason, they got that kind of nomenclature several years ago, and it's continued to do that. Yes, if I get laid off and I don't have a job, I'm going to go to the same facility to get my unemployment check, right? I'm going to verify my employment and do all those things. That's where I'm going to visit. But what most people don't really recognize is that same facility, there is a ton of training programs and partners, and they've done a lot of work through apprenticeship that'll be out there to help upskill you if you're unemployed, or even help partner with organizations or a company where they will build out an apprenticeship program or a model that helps that person build the skills up to do those internal hires. And stomp my foot on this one too, and generally that has funding and money to support it, so you don't have to take the financial burden on your own. Now, it's government, and with most things government, it generally requires paperwork, and it generally requires a couple other things. So as long as you have some patience and you have some time, it does pay dividends, and it can work, right? And I assure you that if there's an interest from your organization to get involved in skills-based hiring, pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship, somebody there, a Department of Labor or that Workforce Investment Opportunity Act board, will have a conversation with you and help navigate you to complete that. Or if you don't want to do all that, call us and I'll help you out, and I'll run you through how that apprenticeship program could work and what it looks like. But internal promotions, upskilling, so back to the point earlier, it's such a great example and a culture of an organization to show that if you come here and you work hard, we're going to notice your hard work. We're going to invest in you for that hard work, and we're going to get you promoted to the next job, right? And that's all anybody wants to do. That's all you really need to provide some motivation for somebody, right? Really to look at that internal growth. So I want to make sure we've got 6 minutes left here. I really want to kind of talk about this idea of percentages, right? Like, a simple mix would be, 33.3% of each one of these, to be able to go and do it. And that might not work for everybody, especially, if you're you're a startup, or maybe a small manufacturing company, right? The idea of going out and trying to compete with large Fortune 500 companies for the pay for these technology roles is probably hard, right? I know here in St. Louis, MasterCard gets the bad rap for taking all the folks for people because they pay a little bit better. If you can't compete with those, right? So your mix might be different, right? If you are a large Fortune 500 company, and you have the cash to throw around, right? Buying talent may very well be, I'm not gonna say it's the best, the easiest way, right? Definitely not the best, but is the easiest way for you to grow your staff. If you're a small organization that doesn't have that, right, you might have to build a bar, which is fine. I think especially for those organizations that are, let's say, an advanced manufacturer or small to mid-sized business, right, that my secret mix, I think that I would do in this is I would buy one person, right? One smart, bright chief information security officer, chief information CIO, one person who's going to be the quarterback amongst all the things. And, they're going to see this project from start to finish, right? You're going to pay that person a premium. You're going to do an incredible amount of due diligence to make sure that they're culture fit, they're skill fit, and they're going to stay, right? Because that's an important part of it, especially if you're building out a 2 to 3 year project here. You want that person to stay. So I would hire that person. And then from that, I would really look at, the build and borrow is I would probably borrow a bulk portion of what the project base, right? Like the setup, maybe the due diligence for like software and what technologies you want to use for this stuff. I'd partner with somebody, right? Like that's their skill set. They're good at looking at those things. They've done it, for multiple people across over the years. Get that person, get your foundation with the support of the person you buy, build out that program with that support, and then build the internal team around it to really make it work, right? That ability to maybe hire buy a couple key folks within that management chain, right, to really oversee the things, or maybe a particular skill set for that individual that it's really hard and specialized to go out and get, right? Buy a couple of those folks, and I would say build around it, right? Find an apprentice or do college recruitment. And I never have trashed college, internships or college apprenticeships, because it's important, right? It keeps your workforce young, it keeps it motivated, and it keeps it diverse by doing that. So, but you build it to that combo of maybe upskilling in current employees, like we talked about earlier, recruiting college kids into it. But now you've got strategy, you've got a foundation and a core group of people that are driving it, and you've got all the nuts and bolts of the program already kind of built out for the group that you contracted with to do it, right? So between that mix, you now have a solid foundation of a security team. And then as money changes and frees up and things get advanced in technology, you have the ability at that point to then really think through, okay, what is the ongoing strategy we're going to implement between buying, building, or borrowing, right? And that part, you can continue to grow with it as your budget grows and the company grows. But I think that strategy, and we take that analogy a little bit earlier, the crawl, walk, run mindset with that, you're really going to get yourself very far. So in closing, thank you so much for tuning in as always. I enjoy doing these. This one was particularly fun. I'm going to follow this up with a blog we'll post on Friday on our socials, because I think it's really an important subject, and one that I think is really timely, just given all the things I'm seeing around layoffs and turmoil and just, changes across the board of the labor landscape. And so I wish you luck if you're one of those folks that have gotten caught up or will get caught up between now and the end of the year, but temporary blip, right? And hopefully it'll right set itself in the not so distant future. But as always, if you have questions, please hit me up on LinkedIn. If you want some support, I feel confident we can come in and help give you some, I'm gonna call it impartial. Of course, we want you to work with us because that's the way we do. And we have tons of great, smart, bright folks that are available for building, right? That we can help kind of grow that. But, if you want advice or want to talk through some of this stuff, hit us up. I'm always happy to help have a conversation. But with that being said, thank you all so much. I appreciate the kind comments. I see lots of new faces in here, which is exciting. I felt like, this was a topic. If you have other topics you want us to cover, or you want us to go and find speakers about this stuff, or if you want to be a guest, I know I kind of put it out on the social media. I try to make it easy. I'll drop the link to sign up to be a participant in LevelUp Cyber Live in the comments after this is done. But would love to have you. I'm trying to book us out for the remainder of the calendar year, just so we don't have to worry about it. It gives me plenty of time to promote it and recruit and get folks into the session. But if you have questions, thoughts, topics you want to cover, let us know. But until next time, thank you so much. I hope everybody has a great week. Happy first week of fall. Very exciting time for everybody. I'm looking forward. I know myself and my wife are really looking forward to the leaves changing, and I love Halloween. So have a great end of your week, and thank you so much for tuning in.